Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I still remember that night, the sound of rain against the car windows, the quiet hum of the radio playing something neither of us was really listening to. It was one of those nights that felt suspended in time, where every word seemed too heavy and every silence said too much. He was sitting beside me, his hand resting just a few inches away from mine, close enough for me to feel the warmth radiating from his skin. And when his fingers brushed against mine, just barely, it was like everything we'd both been trying so hard not to say suddenly became real. There was something about that touch, something hesitant, careful, but honest. We'd been friends for years, maybe even longer than either of us should have been before realizing there was more. But that night, everything felt different. Maybe it was the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, or the way his voice softened whenever he said my name. Whatever it was, it made my heart ache in a way I hadn't felt before. We were both 20, old enough to know what we were feeling, but young enough to be afraid of it. Love, real love, wasn't something either of us had planned for. It just happened. And maybe that's what made it feel both terrifying and beautiful. The world outside the car was quiet, blurred by rain and streetlights, but inside, it felt like something was about to change. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't have to. His hand lingered near mine like a question he was too afraid to ask. I wanted to reach out, to tell him I felt it too, that same pull, that same confusion, but words felt useless. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than anything else. And in that silence, his touch told me everything. Have you ever felt that moment? When someone's presence says what their lips can't. When a single glance or a small, fleeting touch feels louder than any confession. If you have, then you know exactly what I mean. You know that strange mix of fear and hope that makes your chest tighten and your thoughts race. That night should have ended like any other. We should have driven home, said goodnight, and pretended nothing happened. But we didn't. Or maybe we couldn't. There was something in the air, something we couldn't take back once it started. Even now, I can still feel it, the electricity in that space between our hands, the unspoken words hanging in the air. Sometimes, I wonder if he felt it too, or if I was the only one caught in that quiet storm. But then I remember the way he looked at me, how his breath caught for just a second when our fingers touched, and I know he did. The days that followed that night felt heavier, quieter, like the air between us had changed. We still talked every day, sending each other messages, laughing about small things, but there was something different now. Every time he smiled, I caught myself wondering if he was thinking about it too. About that one fleeting touch. About what it meant. We'd known each other since college. He was always the calm one, the kind of guy who never rushed into anything. He liked things steady, predictable. I, on the other hand, was always restless, always needing to move, to figure things out right away. Maybe that's why we worked so well as friends. We balanced each other. But lately, it felt like that balance was slipping into something we couldn't define. One afternoon, I found myself sitting across from him in a small cafe we used to visit all the time. It was supposed to be just coffee, just catching up like always. But the moment our eyes met, I felt that same quiet pull I'd tried to ignore. He looked tired, distracted even, like he'd been thinking too much. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but unsure. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked, not meeting my eyes. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My fingers tightened around my cup as I searched for the right words. "Sometimes," I said carefully. "Do you?" He nodded slowly, a small, almost nervous smile forming. More than I should. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick, charged, like every word we didn't say was floating in the air between us. I wanted to ask what he meant, what he was really trying to say. But then the waiter came by, breaking the moment like it was never there. And, just like that, we both pretended everything was normal again. That was the hardest part, pretending. Pretending that the way my heart raced around him was nothing. Pretending that his lingering glances didn't mean anything. We were both too careful, too scared of ruining something good. But deep down, I think we both knew we were already standing on the edge of something we couldn't control. Later that week, he offered to walk me home after a late study session. It was chilly, the kind of night where your breath comes out in small clouds. We talked about random things, future plans, classes, music, but there was always this undercurrent, a tension just waiting to surface. When we reached my building, I hesitated before saying goodnight. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I'll see you tomorrow," he asked. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, tomorrow." But as I turned to go, he reached out, not to grab my hand this time, but just to touch my sleeve. A small, quiet gesture. Still, it stopped me in my tracks. Our eyes met again, and for a brief second, I thought he was going to say something that would change everything. But he didn't. He just smiled, the kind of smile that hides more than it shows, and whispered, "Good night." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every word, every look. It felt like we were trapped in this delicate dance, both of us moving closer, then stepping back before the truth could spill out. Maybe we were scared of losing each other. Or maybe, deep down, we already knew we were too far gone to go back. Have you ever had someone who felt like both comfort and chaos all at once? Someone who could make your heart race just by standing close? If you have, then you understand why I couldn't walk away. Because sometimes, it's not about what's said, it's about everything that isn't. And in that silence between us, something was beginning to grow, something neither of us was ready to name. The days kept moving forward, but inside, it felt like time had slowed down. Every small interaction between us carried a new kind of weight, an unspoken question neither of us had the courage to ask. It was strange how something as simple as a touch or a glance could change everything. We still met up almost every day, still talked like before, but there was always something hiding beneath the surface now. Sometimes he'd look at me a little too long. Sometimes I'd catch myself smiling for no reason when he said my name. And then there were moments when he'd pull away so suddenly, as if he'd remembered something that scared him. That back and forth, those tiny pushes and pulls, were driving me crazy. I wanted clarity, but I also feared what that truth might mean for us. One evening, we went to a friend's small gathering, nothing fancy, just a few familiar faces, music, and quiet laughter. Everything felt ordinary until I noticed how distant he seemed. He was talking to everyone but avoiding my eyes. When someone asked if he was seeing anyone, I saw the hesitation in his face before he shook his head. "No, not really," he said. "Not really." Those two words echoed in my chest for the rest of the night. Later, when most people had left, I found him sitting outside on the porch steps, staring at the streetlights. I sat beside him without saying a word. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, like every emotion we'd both been holding back was just waiting to spill over. Finally, he said, "You know, I didn't mean to make things complicated." "Too late for that," I whispered. He smiled faintly, his eyes still fixed on the distance. I don't know what this is. Or what it's supposed to be." His words stung, even though I understood. I wanted to tell him that I didn't know either, that maybe we didn't need to define it yet, that maybe it was okay to just feel. But instead, I said nothing. Maybe silence was safer than saying something that could ruin everything. Over the next few weeks, we tried to act normal again, but it wasn't working. He started spending more time away, caught up in work and late-night projects. I told myself it was fine, that we both needed space, but I couldn't ignore the growing distance. Every time he didn't answer a message, my heart sank a little deeper. Then, one night, he showed up unexpectedly at my apartment. His eyes looked tired, his voice low. "Can we talk?" he said. The way he said it, soft but certain, made my pulse race. He stepped inside, his hands buried in his pockets, like he was holding something back. "I've been trying to figure things out," he said quietly. "But the more I try, the more confused I get." I took a step closer, searching his face. "About what?" He hesitated, looking torn. About us. About what this means. The air between us grew thick. He was close enough now that I could feel his breath. For a moment, it felt like he was about to tell me everything, to finally break the tension that had been building for weeks. But then, as quickly as the moment came, he stepped back, shaking his head. Maybe this isn't the right time. And just like that, he was gone again, leaving behind nothing but more questions. The days after that night felt like walking on a tightrope. Every text, every glance, every word between us carried an unspoken weight. We were both pretending that nothing had changed, but it had. Something inside both of us had shifted quietly, deeply, and there was no going back. He started avoiding me again, though not completely. It was more subtle this time. Shorter replies. Quicker goodbyes. A sudden change of subject whenever things got too personal. I told myself I wouldn't overthink it, but my heart didn't listen. It kept replaying the sound of his voice that night, the way he'd said my name, and the look in his eyes before he pulled away. Then one evening, I saw him unexpectedly at a local art show downtown. The place was dimly lit, music playing softly, people moving around in quiet clusters. I hadn't planned on being there, it was a last-minute decision. When I saw him, my first instinct was to leave before he noticed. But he did. And when our eyes met across the room, something inside me froze. He walked over slowly, as if unsure whether to say hello or just keep his distance. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, his voice low but steady. Yeah, I replied, forcing a smile. Guess I just needed a distraction. For a while, we just stood there, pretending to admire the art around us, though neither of us was really looking. The tension was thick enough to feel. I could sense he wanted to say something, maybe even explain everything that had been left hanging between us. But instead, he said, "There's something I should tell you." My heart skipped. What is it? He looked around, as if making sure no one was listening. Not here. Can we talk after this? The rest of the night felt like a blur. I couldn't focus on anything except the thought of what he was about to say. Every passing minute felt longer, heavier. When the event ended, we walked outside together, the cool night air hitting our skin. He was quiet, his hands shoved in his jacket pockets, his expression unreadable. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. You said you needed to tell me something, I said, my voice trembling. He stopped walking and turned to face me. His eyes looked different, tired, conflicted, almost sad. I've been keeping something from you, he said softly. I felt my stomach twist. What do you mean? He hesitated for a long moment, like he was fighting himself. Then he whispered, You deserve to know the truth. About me, and about why I've been pulling away. The world seemed to slow down around us. The streetlights flickered, the city noise faded into the background. Every heartbeat felt louder, every breath harder to take. And then he took a deep breath, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, The reason I can't stay away from you is the same reason I shouldn't have fallen for you at all. For a long moment, I couldn't find the words. The air between us was heavy, like it carried something too real to ignore. His eyes didn't move away from mine, and that silence, filled with all the emotions neither of us could name, felt louder than anything he could have said. What do you mean? I finally whispered, my voice barely holding steady. He looked down, running a hand through his hair before answering. I wasn't supposed to get close to you. I told myself from the beginning that I couldn't. But I did. And now I don't know how to undo it. The words hit harder than I expected. There was something in his tone, something that sounded like regret, but also longing. You're not making sense, I said softly. Why couldn't you? He hesitated, his jaw tightening before he finally spoke again. Because I've been hiding something from you. Something I should have told you months ago. My chest tightened. Every second stretched painfully long. I wanted him to say it, to just rip the truth out into the open, but part of me was terrified of what I might hear. He finally said, I was supposed to leave the city. I had a job offer out of state, a big one. I was set to go, but then I met you. And everything changed. I stared at him, the world spinning just slightly. So you were just going to disappear? He looked at me with that same quiet guilt. I thought it would be easier. If I stayed away, you wouldn't get hurt. But the more I tried, the harder it got. I didn't plan for any of this. Something in me ached, but another part burned with frustration. You should have told me, I said, my voice shaking. You let me believe that I did something wrong. I know, he said, taking a step closer. I know I messed up. But every time I looked at you, I couldn't think straight. I didn't want to lose what we had, even if it meant lying to you. It was then that I realized this wasn't just about a job or timing. There was something deeper he still wasn't saying. His eyes told a story his mouth couldn't finish. What else aren't you telling me? I asked quietly. He froze, and for a second, I thought he might finally confess everything. But then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression changed instantly, fear flickering across his face before he turned it off without saying a word. Who is that? I asked, but he didn't answer. He just shook his head. Nothing, he said quickly. Just someone from work. But I knew he was lying. His voice was too tense, his eyes too restless. Something else was going on, something he didn't want me to know. We stood there in the cool night, the distance between us suddenly wider than ever. I could feel the truth hanging in the air, close enough to touch but still out of reach. Before he walked away, he turned back one last time and said, I'll explain everything soon. But you have to trust me. Then he was gone, swallowed by the noise of the city, leaving me standing there with nothing but questions. That night, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my mind. The job, the call, the look in his eyes, it didn't add up. Something was missing. Something big. Was he really leaving, or was there another reason he was pulling away? I waited for days, my mind replaying every word, every hesitation, every fleeting touch. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth, the full truth. I found him at the park where we had spent countless afternoons talking, laughing, and sharing secrets. He was sitting on the bench, hands clasped tightly, staring at the pond as if it held all the answers. When he saw me, his expression softened, but the tension in his shoulders didn't disappear. I wasn't sure you'd come, he admitted quietly. I had to, I said, my voice trembling. I need to know everything. No more hiding. He nodded, taking a deep breath. Okay, I'll tell you everything. I promise. He started slowly, explaining how he had been offered a job out of state, yes, but there was more. He had discovered something about his past that had shaken him to the core, something that made him question every relationship he had ever had. I didn't want to drag you into it, he said. I thought if I stayed away, it would protect you. I listened, my heart pounding, desperate to understand, desperate to forgive. The way he spoke, his vulnerability, the raw honesty, it made me ache for him even more. And the call? I asked softly. He hesitated, then finally said, it was from someone trying to stop me from telling you. From someone who didn't want you to know the truth about me. My mind raced. The truth about you? He looked into my eyes, steady and unwavering. I wasn't just afraid of leaving or losing you. I've been protecting a secret, something that could change everything between us. And the moment I realized I couldn't hide it anymore, I knew I had to be honest, even if it scared both of us. Then he reached for my hand. The contact, familiar yet electric, sent a shock straight through me. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. I can't. Not like this. Not ever. Tears welled in my eyes as the tension that had haunted us finally began to break. I squeezed his hand back. Then don't, I said simply. We'll figure this out together. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped, the suspense, the uncertainty, the fear all melting away in the warmth of our shared truth. But just as I thought the storm had passed, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and froze, his face going pale. What is it? I asked, my voice catching. He swallowed hard. It's from someone who knows more than I realized. Someone who's been watching all along. I stared at him, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through me. "What do you mean?" He looked at me with a tense, almost guilty smile. "I think our story is far from over." And in that moment, I realized the truth. We had resolved the tension between us, but a new mystery had just begun. The tension lingered in the air for a few more moments, but finally, he slipped his phone into his pocket and turned to me fully, exhaling as if a weight had been lifted. "Whatever this is," he said softly, "we face it together. No more hiding, no more running." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. The uncertainty that had haunted us for weeks, the fear of losing him, the mystery of his secret, was finally giving way to something real: trust. We sat on the bench in silence for a while, watching the pond shimmer under the streetlights. Every ripple seemed to echo the calm that had finally settled between us. Over the next few days, we began to rebuild the rhythm of our friendship, but now with honesty at its core. Conversations that had been awkward or avoided before were open and sincere. He shared the details of the secret he had been protecting, a complicated situation involving family and a past relationship that required careful handling, but now, with me by his side, it felt manageable. The fear that had threatened to push us apart instead became a bridge that drew us closer. We started spending more intentional time together, coffee dates in quiet cafes, long walks in the park, evenings talking under the stars. The brush of hands, the lingering glances, the subtle touches, all of it felt natural again, no longer fraught with hesitation. Every small moment reminded me that sometimes love is as much about patience and understanding as it is about passion. Even the shadow of the mysterious watcher became less threatening over time. We learned to approach it together, cautiously and intelligently, strengthening the trust between us. By the time we addressed it fully, we realized it was nothing more than a misunderstanding, someone from his past misinterpreting a situation. The relief was immense, and the laughter that followed felt like a promise that no secret, no fear could ever separate us again. By the end, the story wasn't just about the initial tension or the moment his hand brushed mine. It was about how love grows through honesty, trust, and vulnerability. We had faced uncertainty, hidden truths, and suspenseful fears together, and we emerged stronger, more connected, and ready to embrace a future where we no longer had to pretend or hide. Sometimes, love isn't just about sparks and romance. It's about patience, trust, and the courage to face every challenge together. That night, that bench, and that brush of hands became more than a memory. It became the beginning of something real, grounded, and enduring. How do you feel about how our story ended? Would you want a sequel to see what adventures and challenges come next for us? Let me know in the comments below. Summary: the way his hand brushed against mine told me everything he wasn't saying is a suspenseful romantic story about two friends discovering the depth of their feelings amidst secrets, misunderstandings, and uncertainty. As they navigate the tension of unspoken emotions and hidden pasts, their connection grows through honesty, trust, and courage.